provocateur.media.
If you're just looking for momentary happiness, well, what do you need to do? You could have pizza, watch Netflix, and masturbate. It's really not that complicated to be happy in the moment. But I don't think that's what most people mean when they say that they want to have a good life. They want to have a meaningful existence, one where they feel like what they do matters and is important. And sometimes that will generate happiness, but not necessarily.
The Goldwaters is brought to you by Goldwater Dubé, shaping the history of Canadian family law since 1981.
The Goldwaters vous est présenté par Goldwater Dubé, modeler l'histoire du droit familial canadien depuis 1981.
It's episode number 10 of the Goldwaters. I am your moderator, Dan Delmar, and it's my pleasure to introduce the Goldwaters to you. We have Anne-France Goldwater, Dr. Samantha Goldwater-Adler, and Daniel Goldwater, of course. And they are here to discuss issues in the news, or in this case, we're actually going to discuss happiness on the podcast today. They like to just take a step back from the news once in a while and talk about something that should be, I think, important to all of our lives. So let's get right into it. What is happiness to you, and how do you ensure that it's part of your life, or is it?
Well, I think that is the good place to start, because other than being a temporary and ephemeral feeling that it's nice to experience on a day-to-day basis, I really don't understand why we would attach so much importance to an emotion that is so transient and not really relevant to what the meaning of life is. I think the meaning of life is all about striving, ambition, and passion. And I think if we were to spend our days in a state of blissful contentment and happiness, we wouldn't accomplish anything. Civilization would come grinding to a halt. So why not recognize that it's insatisfaction, maybe a certain degree of lack of contentment that makes us strive to change our environment, to achieve, to accomplish, and to do more?
I think there's certain areas that I agree with you in terms of happiness. I do think it's fleeting. It's something that's a momentary feeling that we experience. It's quite pleasant. That's lovely to experience. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, but I do think it's still important. I think it's something that's motivating, that's reinforcing. It tells us once we've done the striving, hey, you done did it. You did a good job. And just having that pleasant feeling is enough to kind of help us to buckle down and keep on going. And even in terms of basic things, a lot of happiness feelings are triggered when we're hitting survival behaviors. So even when we see babies, for example, and we have that nice warm feeling of, oh, they're so cute and so sweet. That's because human babies, are fundamentally useless in the animal kingdom. They take a really long time to develop. They're extremely difficult to take care of. They're up all night. Most babies in the animal kingdom, when they're born, they just come out and they start walking and they feed and they're off on their merry way pretty shortly thereafter.
See, that's the awesome example that I think proves my hypothesis, because at the end of the day, we're programmed to take care of those babies and to view them positively. But in fact, study after study has shown that having children as a general proposition contributes to our unhappiness in life. And certainly babies and toddlers do not engender happiness.
Not unhappiness, just less happiness. Those are very different things. And negative emotions are not the same thing as positive emotions, and they don't exist necessarily on the same continuum.
Well, I'm not sure what you're driving at with the children. The overall balance sheet for having children is negative. People who are married are happier than people who are unmarried, but people who have children, all ages combined, are generally less happy.
Yeah, the overall balance sheet, but different rubrics. There are some that speak to meaning, and that's a different part of the balance sheet that you should look at.
And I think that's a really important thing that you're touching on is meaning. And frankly, when I'm doing therapy with clients, it's one of the big distinctions that I make is between happiness and between meaning. And I think that touches a bit on what you're talking about, Mom, as well, which is that when you're striving for something that matters to you, that you feel is moving towards your values, that's important to you, it's not always happiness inducing. It's not always pleasant along the way. And I think that, frankly, that's one of the most important things. When I talk to clients, I often give the example, because a lot of clients will come in and say that they want to be happier. And I can give them tips to be happier, absolutely. But I think that's not necessarily the main focus, because if you're just looking for momentary happiness, well, what do you need to do? You could have pizza, watch Netflix, and masturbate. It's really not that complicated to be happy in the moment. But I don't think that's what most people mean when they say that they want to have a good life. They want to have a meaningful existence, one where they feel like what they do matters and is important. And sometimes that will generate happiness, but not necessarily.
Well, as we're taping, and we tape often in the Goldwater home, Spot, the disabled pit bull, is running around, and I can't help but think, as he was looking up to me with just what seemed like a giant smile on his face, that this is a creature who has endured a tremendous amount of pain in his life and abuse, and who nonetheless seems to be happy all the time.
There's a reason why I have 5 dogs in this house. And there is no question that living in the company of dogs is an awesome reminder of the fact that certain species seem to have got that nailed down, that ability to be reasonably conscious, reasonably sentient, and I think nobody would doubt that about dogs, and that their general frame of mind is, I'm happy. I'm a dog, I'm happy. I'm a dog, I'm happy. I don't think we can emulate that. I don't think we should. I don't think we're programmed to do that. I think Samantha was getting closer to one of those eternal realities, that when you do things that can be in fact unpleasant, and we used a rather banal example, studying for an exam, but with a view to accomplishing something that we conceive of as important as each individual conceives of as important for himself, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of striving, the sense of struggling to achieve goals, it was what gives happiness. And that's why people are not necessarily happier when they retire. They're not necessarily happier the day they've paid off the mortgage or done all those banal things that we think are supposed to now create this constant state of happiness to kick in. It's just not so. It's from the fact of continuing to work and to struggle and to strive that there is that sense of what Samantha called meaning, a meaning in life, a meaning that only an individual can define for himself.
Just, Dan, to push back on your original question, which had this presumption that dogs are, say, creatures that apparently have a lower order of consciousness than we, that happiness comes easier to them. I push back on that because animals, dogs particularly, because I have more direct experience with them, experience boredom and sadness and pain. And in fact, there's evidence that they also do more when they're dead in a way that's less intense, say, than elephants and elephant graveyards. So I don't think that happiness is more present in their lives. And as to Mom's point about happiness, about the struggle, right, is what really keeps us going. I generally agree with you, Mom, even though I like to disagree, that the pursuit of happiness, I mean, it's a key phrase that's embedded in the American Constitution and modern Western democracy. And interestingly enough, many people might know, for extra credit, the original draft was the pursuit of property. And so there was a big fight about it with Jefferson about changing it to happiness. But nonetheless, it's the pursuit thereof, yes, that keeps us thriving and all that.
All I said is they're just a species that nailed the happiness equation, and it's true. And I think but they didn't. No, I don't agree with you. I think you're disregarding the fact that dogs are hugely less neurotic than we are. And the dogs only become neurotic when they live with humans and become infected with our tendency to chase unhappiness and misery. Seems to be uniquely human trait.
Let's take a step back here. I think that one thing, and if we're going to get to the dog and sort of the general happiness conversation, is I think that one thing that I do see in dogs, whether they're overall happier or not, that I can't say one way or another, and I'm not in a dog's head, that what dogs do have, or what a lot of animals do have, is an ability to experience the moment as just the moment, to be able to truly single task. And in the moment when they're feeling happiness, so when they do get a treat, when they do have a good stretch or a good scratch behind the ear, to be fully present and to fully experience it. And I think that that is important in our lives. Although I don't think that happiness is the be-all and end-all in terms of what we strive for in our lives, I do think that happiness is very important punctuation points that keep us going. And I think that I'm really inspired by the term by Shade Meng Tan from one of the Google happiness gurus, thin slices of joy. And aiming for that and striving for that in our days, where we have a lot of very pleasant, we're constantly seeking the next step. Even when we're sitting at work, we're thinking about what we're going to do after work. When we're after work, we're thinking about what we're going to have for dinner. While we're having dinner, we're thinking about what we're going to have for dessert, and then we're thinking about what we're, so we rarely give ourselves the opportunity to, when we achieve those things, to truly just sit back and enjoy them completely and fully with all of our being.
But what kind of bothers me about that rhetoric and the rhetoric of mindfulness in the modern era is I recognize its utility to speak to the prevalence of depression and anxiety in modernity, which seems to be quite epidemic in the Occidental world. But it seems to me that it's a very slippery way to avoid talking about happiness, because the point of mindfulness is to try to take time away from the anxiety and stress that overwhelm us. I noted it was pointed out, and I was just involved in a student activity involving senior high school students, and I was stricken by how much senior high school students, kids who are 17 years of age, have to accomplish in that year. And it's totally unlike anything that I experienced at their age. And so you can see that there's a sense of pressure in time, pressure in accomplishment, pressure in competitiveness, and mindfulness takes you away from that sense of speeded up reality. So I get it, and I see why it's a useful tool. I don't know what any of that has to do about happiness. When you look at the ingredients of happiness, well, the happiness thing, well, go for a run and play with a puppy and laugh and smile and take a vacation. Well, none of those activities is productive or meaningful or really useful.
Well, but part of it is to be able to, I think, you're more or less on mindfulness. When you say time away from the stress and anxiety, that's not entirely what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is being fully present and non-judgmentally accepting the moment. And if the moment is punctuated by stress and anxiety, well, so be it. It's not trying to strive for the next emotion or for the next feeling or even to take necessarily a vacation from it. It's to be fully present in it without adding on, anxieties about, if you're feeling, for example, anxious in the moment, it's being mindful of that anxiety in the moment instead of adding on the thoughts about the future or the thoughts about the past, which neither you can really control very well.
But I'd have to point out that I was sitting playing the role of a judge in a moot court for this group of high school students. And I'm telling you, I could have sat there. It was 3 hours into the hearing, and I joked with the kids, I could sit here till midnight, but I think we're going to have to move along in the arguments and get a resolution and declare some winners and losers and award some prizes. But I literally was in what I think a productive mode, exercising my profession. I was not doing any of these mindless acts of nonsense like walking in a park or enjoying a cup of tea. And I have to say, I never feel more alive than when I'm in a trial at either end. Now, this was a moot court. I was playing the role of a judge. My mind was challenged, my legal experience, my intellect. I was hugely impressed by the work the kids were doing, and I was happy to bathe in the ocean of my expertise forever and take these kids who were as passionate as I about the law and go along together for the ride.
While I slowly and joyfully sip my tea.
Yeah, I noticed you made yourself a cup of tea, but not me.
Well, you don't appreciate it, clearly. What you just described, in fact,
touche.
What you just described can, in fact, cohere with mindfulness, because it sounds like you're describing a flow state. Flow states in positive psychology and in mindfulness training refer to when you are so inside a task that there's an absence of mind wandering, there's an absence of anxiety and depression because the task has you so engaged. So maybe you were in a flow state and hence you were happy and engaging with mindfulness. The challenge, therefore, is that might not be sustainable. You said that you could have stayed all night. I challenge you next time to stay all night and see how you feel at the end of it.
You've worked with me on cases,
and
Daniel.
You get snappy.
I do?
A little.
I don't believe you.
Never,
You must be talking about somebody else's mother. But
Well, I think to even take a step back from all of this, there's two very important things. One is that one size doesn't fit all, really, in terms of happiness. Not everybody is going to go for a stroll in the park or have a cup of tea. as you were giving the examples, and find that an enjoyable experience. And it doesn't have to be one size fits all either. The point is to be able to have some happiness in your life, some things that you just enjoy just for the sake of enjoying them. And sometimes those things will be productive and meaningful, and sometimes they won't. And I think that putting this very almost boomer ideal of just, well, if you just work hard enough and if you work the 23 hours of the day, then this will be the path to the greater unhappy or happiness irrelevant existence, I think is slightly missing the point. I think you still need to have some positives in your life, and wherever you find them is wherever you find them. And I find it very funny as you're talking about, being in this moot court and thinking so hard and working so hard and really getting this pleasant feeling out of it, and saying that, the only noble thing is to get enjoyment out of these sort of work and productive type endeavors, when I happen to know, and listen, audience, that my mom is obsessed with puzzles. The dining room table is covered in about 6 different several thousand piece puzzles that she will spend the evening obsessing over. And last I checked, these are not very productive endeavors.
And to complement my sister's point, productivity doesn't really mean anything if you don't know what your goal is.
Yes.
Productivity has to be
Finishing the puzzle. What else is the goal?
Okay, but for example, Mom, if your goal was to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, then working out, say, 5 hours a day would be productive. If you're working out 5 hours a day, but trying to be the head of a law firm and one of the best lawyers and moms on this planet, then if you worked out 5 hours a day, that would get in the way of that goal, would be unproductive.
Yes, let's get into the science, and maybe Dr. Samantha, you can start us off here, but there are rituals that trigger hormones, which then can make people more happy. At least that's what some studies have shown. What are some of those rituals? Making puzzles may be one for you and France, but Samantha, are there specific rituals that people can sort of do that we know will make them happier?
Well, it's hard to give guarantees for anything, but that can increase the probability of them experiencing some happiness, absolutely. There's, on a very basic level, anything that they could potentially enjoy. So even just, as I mentioned earlier, having pizza, watching Netflix, masturbating, these are all things that can increase happiness in the moment. But I think to your point, people tend to be looking for something that's going to last a little bit longer in terms of that happiness boost. And things like that involve exercise, can really give a happiness boost. Things that involve nature often increase happiness. Performing an act of kindness, to go back to Mom's point, this is something that's really interesting in the research. If I did something nice for you, Daniel, let's say I made you the tea and I brought to you, then you would have a momentary boost of happiness like, oh boy, tea. Thanks, that was lovely. And interestingly enough, I would be the one to experience the longer boost of happiness, feeling that, oh, I did something nice for my brother. What a good sister I am. So yes, giving gives can give a nice happiness boost. And there's been some evidence in terms of seeking out experiences rather than things. Finally, there's, of course, mindfulness and meditation. Those things, the more it's dose specific, so the more you do, the more boost there is generally in terms of happiness and decrease in some of the more negative emotions.
One thing that we haven't really talked about is just regular sleep. I think it's a key component. It's a bit more boring, but going to sleep at the same time every day and waking up at the same day as best I can. That's a ritual I do try to maintain. I see it as a ritual. I also see that when I come into my office every morning, I meditate in my office, I close the door, I have actually a guided meditation app, and I also check in with somebody that I love every day. I try to check in terms of how my mood is doing and to listen to how they are doing. These are some of the rituals I have found very helpful to add to the list that Samantha provided, exercise and what have you.
And if I can add there, sleep, yes, as a sleep-deprived parent of 2 very young children, yes, sleep is extremely important. It's really hard to just, let alone be happy, just to function without getting an adequate amount of sleep. And usually it's one of the first things that people will cut out when they're in a stressed state or where they have to be productive, is they'll increase their work hours, they'll take away on sleep, and then it just mayhem ensues. It just causes more problems than anything else. And to go back to the meditation and even to prayer, I think, and there is that consistent research that's been showing, in a review of over 300 studies, that there is a connection between spirituality and health. Prayer can help relieve stress. Spirituality and religious involvement can be linked to greater well-being and happiness. And for people that are atheists, it can be, a bit of a head scratcher. Well, why would that be? And the best that I can consider it is that prayer and religiosity involves an increased sense of connection with the community, with your community of other people that may be practicing the same faith, and with God, with this sort of sense of a higher power, that you can feel like you're part of something that's greater than yourself and that what you do matters.
But the fact of getting to enough sleep certainly improves functioning, and I am certainly grateful and mindful that I was introduced to that as a concept to improve my health.
In terms of the happiness research, marriage and religion are both things that do tend to boost happiness. People do still value romantic and intimate connections, still value family connections, and frankly, most people in the world still believe in God or in a higher power, however it is that they define it. And I think that these are things that, whatever historical purpose they served, they can serve more than one purpose and more than one function.
Let's move on to the price of happiness and start with that classic question: can money buy happiness? Or perhaps does money just alleviate misery, and is there a difference?
Of course, money can buy happiness, for heaven's sake. Let me tell you, I have had times in my life where I've had it, times in my life where I haven't had it, and the difference in my happiness level, along with a whole other long list of emotions, good and bad, has been quite notable. Although I do take note, and I'm not trying to contradict the studies that say that your happiness is usually optimized once you've gone from poverty to, say, a little over middle class. So the studies go. I never participate in those studies. I might have skewed those figures over a little bit, but certainly the biggest difference for the greatest number of people, and that's why immigrants tend to be such happy and productive and awesome people. You hear that, Cheeto in chief, because they come from poverty and they come to the United States and to Canada, where they can land ordinary jobs and move into the middle class and achieve the biggest boost in happiness that most humans experience, which is being able to pay the bills, put a roof over your head, and clothes on your children's backs, and feeding your family. And that's where the big load of happiness comes from.
Well, yes. Yes, I agree. And there is certainly a body of research suggesting that past a certain income level or past a certain amount of money, then the boost in happiness is very, very little between having, let's say, $75,000 a year and having $750,000 a year. And there's not really much of a difference at that point.
But it shoots up at 75 million.
Yeah, but once you get to that point, then no. You need to have the base of basic needs being achieved, be able to have, food and shelter and clothing, to be able to achieve any higher levels. And once you're getting to, let's say, actualization is conceived of as the top of the hierarchy. So if you don't have your basic needs met, and then if you don't have, once those basic needs are met, if you don't have love and connection, etc., then actualization, whether you're the best human you can be and whether you're achieving the optimal level of happiness of 9 out of 10 instead of 7 out of 10 on whatever scale, is almost irrelevant.
And there's also a corollary to all that for a number of people who were very well-to-do and who suffered economic losses after the stock market crash at the end of 2008. These people suffered a huge happiness hit because they had to fire the second maid and the third groundskeeper, or maybe downsize or give up a country place in the Hamptons, for instance. So by all standards and measures, they were still doing hugely better than other people. But the fact that they lost their whatever the lifestyle is, I don't want to make it, I don't want to appeal to the populace and everyone by saying they lost their multi-million-dollar lifestyle and became only regular millionaires, because that always attracts a certain negative opinion. But whatever it is, it's the loss in social status that was a contributor to unhappiness. So there's a little bit, sort of be careful what you wish for, because if you get it, then you start to have to live at that level and continue to live at that level of consumption.
Which is part of the reason that the increase in money over a certain level doesn't tend to increase happiness very much, because your living standards tend to increase commensurately with your income.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not answering that one because there's nowhere I can go with that one in particular.
What I like to say for myself is I always do my best to try to have one toe in every tribe. I try to make sure that I don't stay in my own community, my own class community or ethnic community, because I start to compare myself to people in my own class and I start to lose sight of things. I start to lose perspective. And I find that when I'm speaking to people in higher socioeconomic strata or lower or completely different sorts of people, artists or immigrants or doctors, lawyers, government people, whatever, I grow more sensitive to the struggles of every other person. And I start to appreciate that it's a common struggle.
So we all pretty much agree that at least some money makes you happier, but what about the specific things you're buying? Millennials, for example, and this has also been studied, shown to derive more happiness from purchasing experiences, like a nice evening out at a restaurant or vacation. Travel is a major source of happiness. What things do you guys purchase that make you happy?
Ooh. Bras that fit.
Well, and actually, yes, I know you're saying this as a joke, but...
Not at all. What joke?
Well, right. But, and part of it is that when you're thinking of what purchases you want to acquire, you want to think of what you're going to get that's going to give you a better experience. And a bra, and something you're going to get a lot of mileage out of.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And so in that case, I think bras is, having a bra that fits is frankly a great example.
I'm also on that experiential tip. I have found though in my life so far that sometimes it got a little out of hand, like constantly going out to restaurants with my partner or with friends. It can take a hit on the finances and it becomes something that might be a little draining. And I recognize that just having a coffee, which is very manageable, is similarly enjoyable and profound, and it stays with me, the conversation and the relation. And lessons I find are very important. I mean, I got tremendous happiness dividends I continue to pay today from a lot of the combat sport training I had done, the boxing and the wrestling. I find that it really changed the way that I see the world, and I often come back to it, and I have now a point of contact with other people that might have done similar types of sports. So I think lessons are very important.
What about in terms of best practices on happiness from other cultures or abroad? We can talk about various practices in Nordic countries. We could talk about festivals, for example, here in Quebec. There's a principle, of course, that there should be some government-subsidized arts festivals to increase happiness or increase social behavior in the population. What are some of your favorite best practices in terms of happiness in other cultures?
Well, I have to say probably the most trivial example, but it actually did mark me, was when I was visiting Helsinki in Finland, and the public transportation had ergonomic seating. And this may sound like a ridiculous thing to latch onto, but it really made such a difference. And it's something I visited many years ago, and I still remember now that just the experience of riding public transportation was so much more pleasant because it was actually comfortable and well thought out. But then when we're getting into, bigger, cultural inspirations, more than ergonomic seating that I don't have much control over in terms of public transportation here, would be, frankly, Buddhist concepts in terms of mindfulness and meditation, really being able to be present in the moment and fully and non-judgmentally without trying to change it.
Well, it occurs to me that turns out that it's a word that pronounced similarly, in fact, Norwegian, Swedish, and other languages of the Nordic countries. And it was kind of funny because before reading about hygge, it occurred to me that the way to be happy is you have to live in a crazy cold climate like Montreal. Because until you've experienced the Montreal winter, you have absolutely no appreciation for what it means to walk in a park in the middle of summer. And it's certainly one of the reasons we have so many festivals, the African Nights Festival and the Just for Laughs Festival and the Jazz Festival.
And I have to say, I have so much anticipatory happiness and excitement just thinking about when the snow will thaw and everything will be beautiful, and hearing birds chirping because it's green and gorgeous outside, and being able to fully profit off Montreal's amazing nightlife and activities and just weather during the summer.
And our restaurant scene. I don't think there's a restaurant in Montreal that does not desperately throw some tables and chairs out front, even if they're on a busy street corner, because Montrealers have as an instinct that tremendous conviviality of wanting to sit out with their friends, grabbing a coffee, to Daniel's point, or a beer, let's say to the late Jack Layton's point, out on a patio somewhere at some restaurant and enjoying people watching. So I think that conviviality comes from the fact that we appreciate the short period of good weather we have in the year, no doubt like the Danish, who seem to have turned into a science this notion of conviviality in the home, and the idea of coziness and the idea of having a home as a nest.
In terms of other cultural attitudes that have inspired me in my pursuit of happiness, when I was in Japan a few years back, I was overwhelmed with the aesthetic beauty, the aesthetics, that Japanese aesthetics. It's often just called minimalism, but you also see it in their religion, in Shintoism. I'd done a bit of research on this at the time, and apparently in Shintoism, they're very comfortable with the notion that objects have souls. And apparently this is also why they're actually more comfortable with robots than we tend to be in the West and or outside Japan. And I really tried to take that from the Japanese, and I find that even at my office, like having a sense of connection or love with the objects at my desk and cherishing every one of them, and it's also the decluttering trend that's also online. There's also another podcast and website that I would give a shout out to. It's The Minimalists. This is two guys who talk about minimalism and as a philosophy and as an aesthetic and finance and friends and all those things, but to cherish even things that are inanimate, and to look at them and have a sense of connection to them, and to see that from rock to me, it's just a matter of quantity. It's not really a matter of quality, and it makes me feel far more connected and grounded and full of love, and I feel less dependent upon the judgment of other people or the expectations of other people.
That sounds lovely. That's one of the nicest defenses of materialism I've ever heard. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it can lead to psychopathy, I suppose, once you start falling in love with a lamp. And but it's also pareidolia is also a thing. You know, when you see faces in objects, this is how we anthropomorphize every object that we look at. I would say, in my experience, that was kind of layer one. I started getting inundated with the faces of objects. And then layer two, I think maybe there's a layer 4, 3, 5, 8, 10, that the object has a story and the object has a feeling, and it's there with me and I'm there with it.
I think it sounds beautiful, and I think it ties really nicely into your interest in fashion, that everything has a story and that there's a reason for things, and that objects matter in one way or another, and to really value what you have instead of chasing the next level.
And I would point out that for somebody who loves stones, rocks, and lamps, you're ignoring the fact that this whole time, Mr. Spot has been crying piteously just over in the living room, a room and a half away.
Would you like to invite him in for further reading?
But he's got some great books to suggest.
It's quite operatic, you'll notice. Yeah.
He's had the experience of chewing through some really fantastic books that maybe he can contribute as well.
Yeah, but this microphone stand can also be giving out a plaintive cry that we're just not attuned to listening to.
Okay, you had me there. You had me at that. We're back at the rock and the stone.
All right, let's wrap it up with further reading. What do you recommend on the subject of happiness?
I have a very, very clear candidate. We the Living by Ayn Rand.
Which is a profoundly unhappy book. I remember reading that. I was very sad reading that book. It was great. But I'm curious your reasons.
Well, my reasons would give away the theme of the story. It would give away the ultimate moment of her happiness, in fact, is in the moment when she dies. And there's nothing nihilistic in what I'm saying.
I would say a book that really changed my life was The Happy Lawyer. This is by Douglas Linder and Nancy Levitt. It's Oxford University Press. I even bought it as a gift from my dear mom,
who is still reading it.
And it's really a reflection on positive psychology adapted to a career in law. And there are all sorts of really profound insights from it that really changed my relationship to the profession and helped me come to terms with some of the sadder, more intense parts of it all. And so I recommend anybody who's considering a career in law or is in it to read that book.
Those are great suggestions. I think I'm going to go with The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. And it's something, it's a book that really focuses on mindfulness and a program to really be able to help reduce stress and overcome fear. And really, what I like about it is the focus much more on meaning and pursuing your values rather than just being on this kind of hedonic treadmill, continually trying to achieve the next level of happiness. It's really focusing on what's important to you and what matters and how to get there. Now, that's a psychologist in me that's giving you that recommendation. Now, on the other side, what I'm tempted to do is, frankly, in terms of book recommendations, whatever you enjoy, whatever you think will be a meaningful and connecting and even if it's just trash, whatever's going to be a pleasant experience for you, even if it's $2 out of a book bin or on Kindle, just something that you're going to feel will give you a little bit of reprieve and a break to just enjoy yourself and put your feet up.
I can't help but notice that after this hour or so talk, exchanging with your loved ones, that you all are visibly more happier right now.
Yeah, I think we are.
I do feel more connected to my family, and doing this podcast actually every couple of weeks. It's focused time with my family, and we get to commune on big ideas and reveal something about ourselves to each other.
And, I have to say, it's very sweet, and what a nice way to close. And I agree, too. And I was actually, in taking time to connect with someone else, it's very important to me. When I was just talking to Dad about the podcast, and he was asking, how I found the experience. And it's one thing I had to say, that it's just been really nice having the chance to connect with my mommy and my brother. And it's just like old times, just sitting at the table together and just bouncing ideas around and just connecting on that level. And so I appreciate it. So, and to bring another thing, gratitude. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Mommy. And thank you, Dan, for being here with us.
Oh, you're making me miss your dad. We used to have the dinners used to involve
he's
dad
still
as well.
alive.
No, but he's not here. It would be nice to have him participate too. We have to have him as a guest speaker then. We're going to have to make him fly across this noble country and come participate here.
Well, he speaks through his children, I think, same way you speak through us even when you're not around.
Oh, mushy.
Join us next time for another episode of The Goldwaters. You can listen to past episodes at thegoldwaters.ca. We'll be on Facebook and Twitter as well, so do check us out there and use the hashtag #TheGoldwaters. You can subscribe on iTunes. Please leave a review wherever you can. And don't forget, all the content, including all the further reading content, is at thegoldwaters.ca. Thank you, Goldwaters.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Someone is definitely less happy
You
after
should
this
go
whole...
and pick up a special uptake of him crying.
That's
It's recorded? Good.
that must be stressful. Is there a way to edit that out? That must be stressful.
No, you have to have some of it
it's
in
kinda
for this
nice.
part.
It's kind of nice. Yeah.
Provocateur.media.